What is going on to all my Marvel MCU fans out there, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. I am really excited about this movie review for you all. We are talking Marvel Studios' 26th film in the filmography in the last 13 years. We're talking about The Eternals, ladies and gentlemen. Got a chance to check it out the other night in IMAX, and I am just so excited to let you all know my pros, my cons, my overall thoughts, my score, and let you know if it's worth checking out in this spoiler-free review. Before we break it all down, do me a favor and check me out on all my other social media accounts. If you all are new to the channel, well, welcome to the community. Consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. That way you can get the alert for when I drop new content. If you all enjoyed this spoiler-free review of Eternals, well, make sure to like and share the review. It helps out the channel a lot, but I also appreciate the support. And in those comments, let me know your excitement level for this film prior to the Rotten Tomatoes score, prior to the critics coming out a little bit earlier. What was your anticipation level? But more importantly, ladies and gentlemen, once you've seen Eternals, whether it was an IMAX, standard screens, or whatever the case may be, what did you think of this film? I'm going to say it right now, this is a very different MCU film for me personally. Did you feel the same? Who was your favorite character? Who was your least favorite Eternal? Are you excited to see more from this cosmic side of the MCU? Let's talk about it in the comments below. So, listen, going into this 26th film, if you guys have been following my channel for a while, you know I'm an MCU fan. I've seen all the films. I've done live streams with the TV shows and so on and so forth. So I was very excited for this. Chloé Zhao directing this, the Academy Award-winning director, this cast, the cosmic scale in phase 4 and what it can mean. It was just, excitement level was through the roof. So again, this is going to be a very kind of free-flowing conversation review. No spoilers. I'm going to briefly talk about what characters worked for me, what I think about the story, the direction, the implications without giving too much about the MCU. We're going to talk some criticisms and just obviously finish up with my overall thoughts of the film. So where to begin? Let's talk about this. So just from a fan perspective of being a fan of comics, Marvel, DC is where I'm at the end of the day. I find myself gravitating, since I was a little kid, gravitating towards more of the DC comics, the DC characters. Batman's my favorite superhero. And I'm going to say it right now. This is the most DC MCU film that I've ever seen. Like, they're number one, and this isn't a spoiler, it's been in the trailers, the Superman reference, there's a Batman reference. I mean, literally, this is like, to me, all pun intended, this is like the Justice League for the DC or for the MC universe. It's like very similar characteristics and just power sets and things of that nature. But more importantly, foundationally speaking, one of the reasons I love DC Comics is like we're dealing with gods, right? We're dealing with Kryptonians, we're dealing with aliens, we're dealing with, different planets, and I felt like this was such a DC type of mythology, and Athena being like a Wonder Woman, Icarus being Superman, you have, Phastos being like a cyborg, you have Cersei kind of like Green Lantern abilities, you have Makari as the Flash. So like, as a DC fan, it just broke my heart to see that Marvel is doing DC stuff better than DC is doing itself, but that's a whole other conversation. But again, as a DC fan, I'm loving this world that these characters are giving me, and it's not a coincidence that it's Jack Kirby, who, if you all don't know, is one of the best, comic book writers of all time. Him and Stan Lee obviously have had a lot of different incredible creations over the years when they were alive, and Jack Kirby, DC, New Gods, MCU beat them to the punch. But neither here nor there, let's talk about the movie, and I want to start talking about the director, Chloé Zhao, and I feel so happy for her because, number one, as you all, and I'm going to talk about not too much in depth about the Rotten Tomatoes score. We'll get to that conversation a little bit later, but 13 years. This movie Eternals would not have been made 13 years ago. This wouldn't have been in the same phase 1, phase 2 type of, even phase 3, because we've come so far to have this type of director who, if you haven't seen her films, very small, independent, very intimate, on set type of filmmaking, on location type of filmmaking. I was so happy to see this film, to see that she was able to put her sensibilities, put her stamp of approval on these Eternals, which I wasn't too familiar with Eternals, but now I am an Eternals fan, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But again, going back to Chloé, the thing I love about her in the two films I've seen for her, The Rider and obviously No Man's Land, she has such an intimate feeling to her films. It feels like real people. It feels like real locations. It feels real. It feels honest. It feels like it has breath to it. And the same things that she's put in those films that I've seen of her, she was able to put in a $200 million budget. I mean, if you took her two first films that I've seen and added it up as far as production, I think that it's crazy how much, again, how far Marvel has come. Kevin Feige, Nate Moore, and the whole crew of giving a director like Chloe the sandbox, giving her, there's still some MCU things that she had to play with, which we'll talk about, but I thought at the end of the day, this was more of a Chloé Zhao film than it was a, stereotypical Marvel formulaic, we got to hit this point, that point, joke here, superhero moment here. It felt more of a Chloe film than an MCU film. I would say it felt almost like 90% sci-fi epic story, 10% MCU, which again, I'm an MCU fan, but I prefer new, different, risk-taking, and that's what you get in this film, all thanks to the direction of Chloé Zhao, who did an incredible job directing this film. But let's transition into some other production aspects before we get into the performances and the story. I am a score head. And I know the composer of this film has been working in TV, like Game of Thrones and other movies that he's been a part of. But this score, man, I got to download it. Haven't downloaded it yet. But this has to be top 5 MCU scores. Just off top, Black Panther comes to mind, The Avengers, most recently Loki. And man, I think I got to put Eternals for number 4, and then Captain America. Yeah, I think I'm going with number 4 with Eternals. This score was epic. It had so much going for it. It made it feel so big and ambitious. And again, we're going from 7,000 years of different spanning of one place to the next, and it just felt so immersed with that score. So I definitely want to give props to the composer of the movie, but also going back to Chloé Zhao and her eye for just incredibleness. The being on location means so much. Like seeing our Eternals in the real world, being on these different continents, being on different, in space and in planets, it just felt so different from any other MCU film. And I know a lot of people have brought this up in some of the reviews I've seen as far as like, this is the most beautiful looking MCU film. I 100% back that. This film is absolutely gorgeous to look at. And again, thank you to Disney for allowing me to see it last night in IMAX. To see all that in IMAX was just like breathtaking. So kudos to the production, kudos to the director. Let's talk about these performances. I don't want to make this a 30-minute long review, but I do want to highlight this is 10 characters. We're being introduced to 10 characters for the very first time with the Eternals, and I felt personally, I think I can say I loved all of the Eternals. Like, I felt every single actor, which again, this cast is absolutely incredible. I think this might be one of the best, if not the best, ensemble cast that we've seen in the MCU, but I think that all the Eternals had a moment to shine. There was one Eternal that I'll get to in my criticism that I think didn't get the same type of fleshing out as the other Eternals, but they still had their moments, to say the least. But I want to focus on, I'm going to say, my top 3 Eternals, starting with the lead of the film, Cersei, who I'm so glad that Gemma Chan was able to come back to the MCU with her very small, very insignificant, unmemorable role that she had in Captain Marvel. I'm so glad they brought her back in because she is a movie star. She is an absolute star. And seeing her as Cersei, the Eternal who has just the most love for humanity, which was just so great to see, and seeing her story, her perspective, her taking on this new role later in the film, and just her relationship dynamics between her, Icarus, and her, human Dane Whitman, played by Kit Harington. I just love what Cersei brought to the table. I loved her journey. I loved her power skills, kind of like manipulating different matters and kind of, Doctor Strange type of things where she could make glass into wood and wood into fire, and just all her power sets were so incredible. But again, it was the heart, it was the humanity that she had and the care that she had for the humans that really kind of made me root for that character. So Cersei was definitely someone that was definitely on top of my standout characters. Icarus, played by Richard Madden, who, listen, James Bond, Superman, if my boy Henry Cavill isn't coming back, this guy is such an incredible actor. He has that stoic look to him. He has the power sets of a Superman in this film. He has the complexity, the dynamic nature of the character. It's very layered. It's very complex. It's a lot going on with the Icarus character, ladies and gentlemen. And I thought Richard Madden, the King of the North, before his bastard brother Jon Snow came into the mix for my Game of Thrones fan, but I thought Richard Madden really did a great job of Icarus. Again, seeing his power sets, I can't get over the fact that the film even acknowledged how much he is a Superman and it could be a potential Superman in the future, but neither here nor there. I thought Richard Madden brought a very gravitas performance and really sold himself as like, listen, if that James Bond role needs to be filled, I think he would be great for that, as a lot of people have said as well. And of course, again, if my man Henry Cavill isn't coming back as Supes, Richard Madden, you can definitely get that cape and get it going. So he is definitely someone that stood out to me, but someone that I've been a fan of for a very long time, Brian Tyree Henry, from seeing him first in Atlanta, transitioning to more films in the last few years, him as Phastos, who's the scientist of the Eternals. I really enjoyed his narrative because he was someone, this is what I love about the story, it's like the conflict of the Eternals. They were meant to be sent to Earth 7,000 years ago to protect Earth from the Deviants, and just their goal and their mission at hand, and him being essentially one of the most important people to humanity because he created weapons and created technology. And I wonder, just because he is black, I wonder if there's any ties to him having any hand in helping the Wakandans with their vibranium, but neither here nor there. I love what Brian Tyree brought to the role because there's a sense of loving humanity, falling out of love with humanity, seeing the best sides, the worst sides, seeing his family, which again, if you all do not know, Phastos is the first official outed LGBTQ community gay character in the MCU, and I thought that story was just very intimate, did not feel forced in my opinion, didn't feel like an agenda, didn't feel like anything of that nature, which some people have accused it for, which I personally don't believe that, but I really thought that Phastos was an incredible character. Again, not to, throw my hat in the ring as far as things I would love to see in the future, but I want to see a Phastos, and I want to see, him having some contact and conversations with a Wakandan type of character, Okoye, and of course Siri, or even Riri Williams, where she comes in as Ironheart. So I really enjoyed Brian Tyree Henry as Phastos. Kumail Nanjiani as his character, who I thought was really great in the mix. Kingo, who's someone who has the abilities to kind of shoot lasers and energy balls out of his hands, very kind of Dragon Ball Z-ish. But I thought Kumail was able to be Kumail Nanjiani that we know, the funny guy. But as you all know, the man got pretty fit, which I guess a light spoiler for all the Kumail Nanjiani transformation fans out there. He does not have his shirt off in the film, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen. But neither here nor there. I thought that he was great. He brought a lot of that MCU flavor as far as the comedy that we come to know in these films. So I thought that he was great, as well as his valet in the film. I really enjoyed their relationship. Sprite was a really cool character, someone who's forever young and has a lot to add to the story in regards to not being able to live a life like some of her fellow other Eternals. Gotta mention Angelina Jolie. Again, I can't stress enough how incredible this cast is. So when I heard that she was cast in the film, I'm like, oh, she's automatically going to be the lead. She's going to be the lead of the movie, and it's going to be a great film because I love Angelina Jolie. But she was a supporting character, and I thought she did an incredible job of playing Athena, the warrior, the Wonder Woman of a sense, of an epic warrior who is dealing with a lot in this film without giving too much away. She has a lot of stuff she deals with. She has a really great relationship with Gilgamesh, who I really enjoy, played by Don Lee, and I thought, and just to transition to him, he was fantastic. But going back to Angelina Jolie as Athena, really heartfelt, powerful, badass character, and I really enjoyed what she brought to the mix. I want to make sure I don't miss seeing the Eternals. Makari, who we'll talk a little bit about later, I thought that she was great, the first deaf actress to play in the MCU, and to see her in the role was fantastic. Again, she reminded me a lot of The Flash for obvious reasons. Can't leave out the leader of the Eternals, Salma Hayek as Ajak, who has the abilities to heal the Eternals, to give them longer longevity in their life and things of that nature. She was so great. It's been so long since I've seen Salma Hayek in a bigger blockbuster budget film. I mean, literally, I can't even really think of the last time I've seen her in this type of scale. This might be the first, if I'm not mistaken, but I thought she was great as a leader. She really kind of brought a lot to the role. And I think I touched on all the Eternals. I want to make sure I don't forget any of them because, again, there were just so many great characters. And I thought very similar to how I felt about Guardians of the Galaxy. fall in love with, Star-Lord, Gamora, Nebula, Yondu, Rocket, Groot, Drax, and learning those characters in the MCU and not being familiar with Guardians of the Galaxy like I wasn't familiar with Eternals. I love these characters, man. I really am so happy to see them be able to have this type of impact on the MCU and see what this can mean for the future of the MCU. So definitely performances, characters were really rich, but again, just Cersei, definitely top Eternals, Icarus, and how can I forget? Totally forgot this character, Druid, played by Barry Keoghan. What an incredible actor. He has had such a great young career, and he was so fantastic in this movie, very critical to the plot. He is an Eternal that can manipulate people's minds, and I thought that he was fantastic. So pardon me for forgetting him. He was definitely one of my favorite Eternals, as well as Phastos, and I said top 3, so it's now coming my top 5, and Kinko were probably my top 5 Eternals in a film. So we touched on that, touching briefly on the story here. Again, this to me, as far as MCU, and just as far as films, I don't want to box this film and just in the MCU genre, which is a great genre, 13 years running strong, but I want to talk about it more so as just like a film, because it's a film at the end of the day, right? The story that this film provides, it is so intimate at the same time. It's so epic in scale and so ambitious. And when I tell you all, you have to see this in IMAX. If you have the opportunity, you will not be disappointed. The scope and scale, especially when we go intergalactic and we see Celestials, which we got a hint of that in Eternal, or to say in the Guardians of the Galaxy, the Celestials are massive in scales, ladies and gentlemen. And when you see the Judge and other Celestials that may be in the film, it is mind-blowing. But again, going back to the story, there's so much heart in this film, and it is so character-driven. Again, this is, as I mentioned, it's more of a 90% Chloé Zhao intimate, character-driven film than it is MCU, and I really appreciate that. But just going back to that narrative, these immortal beings coming to Earth, it's very biblical, if I'm being honest with you all, not to make it too religious, but it's a very biblical script regarding Celestials essentially being God, creating different planets, things of that nature, and having these angels essentially protect humans, and then you have the deviants that could be like fallen angels and the devil and all this stuff. It's like very, and again, this is where I think some people might have a disconnect, because it's just like they're not used to that type of DC gods and angels and devils, and more, dive into the more philosophical life meanings and all the different things that I love about DC lore and mythology. There's a lot of Greek mythology in this film that I really appreciated. But going back again, 7,000 years put on Earth to protect the humans from the deviants, and just seeing the different Eternals and their perspective of fighting for humanity, giving up on humanity. Should we be doing this? Do they have free will? I mean, there's so much conversations that I love within this script that I really appreciate it from a story standpoint, and I don't want to neglect at the heart of the film, it's a story about family. It's a story about humanity. It's a story about fighting for what you love for. And I really love the themes that this film really highlights in such a beautiful way, in my personal opinion. So we touched on all the main things that I really want to bring up. Can't forget, with it being an MCU film, there's some great action set pieces, ladies and gentlemen. When we see the Eternals fighting head to head with the Deviants, when you see, other action sequences within the film, I was very impressed by the action in this film. It did not disappoint when it comes to like the action-driven stuff that we come to expect with these Marvel MCU type of action movies. So I really want to applaud that as well. So transitioning into things that maybe didn't really stick the landing for me entirely, nothing that like took away from my overall feelings of the film, but some things I wish would have been brushed up more. I mentioned how all the Eternals had a moment to shine, like literally every character has a moment in this film, which is very impressive. But I will say, going back to Makari, who reminded me of the Flash, she was the only Eternal that I felt like was kind of forgotten about. We get, this movie has variations of flashbacks, and we get a lot of her screen time in the flashbacks, and then we get more of it in the present day, more towards the back half of the film. But I really feel like all the characters had moments of like, this is why I want to help humanity. This is why I don't want to help humanity. This is why I want to go home. This is why I don't want to go home. But she was the only character that really didn't have that type of story, which I thought was a little bit unfortunate, because I was very intrigued by that character. So that's something that comes to mind. I know a lot of people might have issues with the 2-hour and 47-minute runtime. I didn't have an issue with it at all. I thought it was paced pretty well. But I will say, at points, because again, we're spanning between 7,000 years and we would cut between flashbacks, present day flashbacks. I felt like when the film went to the flashbacks to show you, okay, in the present timeline, this is why this character is that way, so let's go back in time. I feel like some of the placements of the flashback were just a little bit misplaced in my personal opinion, which also brings me to something that I knew was going to happen, because again, we're meeting these 10 new characters, we're meeting this whole new, this cosmic, celestials, deviants, eternal, 7,000 years. So there was bound to be exposition, but there is a portion in the film, more so in the second half of the movie, where we get this exposition, and they show us exposition, which I prefer that more so than telling it, but I felt like it was just a lot to take in. I felt like the film could have done a better job of like piecing in the exposition versus like literally spending 10 minutes of just like a history lesson of celestials, eternals, deviants, the meaning why we sent you to Earth. I feel like it could have been just fleshed out and been kind of put in the film within the first half, second half, maybe sprinkle some into the third act, versus just literally spending 10 minutes on this whole exposition dump, which just felt a little bit too exposition heavy for my personal taste. So minus that, man, I really don't have any other criticism with the movie. I didn't have issues with the length. So listen, before I give you all my overall thoughts and my score of this film, make sure if you haven't already to like the video, share the video, leave your thoughts in the comments once you've seen the film, your favorite Eternal, your favorite moment, your least favorite moment. Let's talk about it in the comments, ladies and gentlemen. Overall, because I have so much more to say, but I want to wrap this up not to make it too long. I think I can say I love this film. The more I thought about it, the more I thought about the heart, the direction that Chloé brought to the script, the performances, the narrative that it was telling, the scope of how this opens up the MCU to the degree where I look at the Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame and been like, man, you guys don't even know what's going on right now. There's so much bigger fish to fry when it comes to Celestials and what it can mean for the MCU. It just gets me so excited to see what Kevin Feige has up its sleeve, what other Greek mythology, we're supposedly getting Zeus in Love and Thunder and maybe getting Hercules a little bit later on. We still have our supernatural stuff going on with Moon Knight and Blade. So it just gets me so excited to see that without the highs and the lows, and I'm talking about the Iron Man 2s of the world, the Dark Worlds, Thor Dark Worlds, we had to stumble before we got to this point. So even though I'm not fans of some, not all MCU films are perfect, but it took those stumbles to get to this point. So with all that being said, I'm going to give Eternals a solid 4 out of 5. I do have an opportunity to see this film again in IMAX a day after I'm shooting this video, and I hope I can see it again. And I think my score, I don't see the score going down, I only see the score going up. And just to kind of, before I wrap things up, just to kind of address Rotten Tomatoes just briefly, because I'm not one to, if people don't like a film, they don't like it, but obviously you've heard some of the stuff of people review bombing it because of the LGBTQ community being represented, and this film does have a sex scene, so some people might be in their feelings about certain things, which, whatever the case may be, please, ladies and gentlemen, don't let that score discourage you to seeing this film. I personally think this is a film that is a must-see viewing experience if you're a Marvel fan, an MCU fan, a Jack Kirby fan, a fan of these actors, a fan of this director, and a fan of sci-fi, epic sci-fi films with intimacy, ambitious nature, scope, and scale. This is a film you have to see in theaters, in my personal opinion. That's why I'm giving it a 4 and a 5, and that's why I can see this score going up when I see this film again, hopefully sooner rather than later. So listen, 20-something minutes later, that's my thoughts on the Eternals. Positive over here. Don't know what people have been saying when they say it doesn't have rewatchability. I can't wait to go back into this world. I can't wait to see what this world has to offer with these characters. So as far as future content, I plan on maybe doing a spoiler review potentially. We'll see if I have time to kind of throw that into the mix, and I want to potentially do a spoiler discussion maybe a few days after the movie releases on a Monday, potentially of next week. And if I have the opportunity, I would love to get some of my awesome friends on the YouTube space on this live stream to have a discussion about it. But keep an eye out for that. But listen, I appreciate every single one of you all that stuck around to this point in the video. I really enjoyed this film. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you don't, that's perfectly fine. But I want to talk to you all about this film once you've seen it again. Your highs, your lows, your favorite Eternals, your least favorite moments, things that you're excited to see in the future, let's talk about it in the comments, ladies and gentlemen, because I want to talk to you all about this epic film. So there you have it. Before you all leave, make sure to like the video, share the video, leave your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and of course hit that notification bell. That way you don't miss any of my future videos. Hope you all enjoyed this review. Hope you're staying safe, as you can see on the screen now. Subscribe to my channel, check out my other content, and we'll see you on the next video.